Well, it is then perhaps to move ahead. Thank you all for being here. We have 13 participants and perhaps a few more will join us. Our speaker at the last minute, and we are very privileged and glad to have him, is Dave Devore. Dave is a longtime member. In fact, I was just checking to see that he joined in January 2017, and he's renewed his club membership every year.
I'm paid up. It's good.
You're all paid up, and now you get an additional year, because we want to thank you with an honorarium membership for the 2023. When I contacted Dave, I didn't put too many restrictions. I just said, gee, we'd love to see your photography. We know you're a prolific photographer. You've traveled to Africa this year. You post practically every day, if not every day, on Facebook with bird pictures and other things. And why not just show us some of your more recent pictures, maybe give us a little background story. And he called me back, and I'm so glad that he accepted, because rather than cancel a meeting and feel like we haven't been able to enjoy our hobby as a photographer, we can learn tonight. We are just glad to be together as a group, and to have Dave, who's such an active member, share his images with us. So he's going to share his screen. Dave, do you have anything you want to kind of introduce yourself with?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let me start out that way. I go all the way back to a Brownie camera, and then a Kodak Instamatic with the little flash cubes, and then a Polaroid one step. That was pretty cool. And mostly just family stuff, family vacations, just snapshots. And then I started traveling a bit. My first digital camera was a Kodak that was 5x zoom that I got at Sam's for about $200, and it would do panoramas in the camera. And it was maybe about 5 megapixels, which was not bad for that. And that had to be, probably somewhere around 2008. And it's been digital ever since, of course. I helped build churches in Mexico with my church from 2005 to 2009. And my first trip was into the great unknown. Nobody had any pictures. They just had stories. I didn't speak the language. It was a great leap of faith into the great unknown. So I decided I was going to fix that. And I started making, at that time, CD slideshows for all the guys that went on the trips, and the women too. We had women along as well, and their families. So we could show what was going on, and it took a lot of the fear factor out of it, and it really helped recruit more people to do that. So anyway, from 2005 to 2009, I did that in Matawala and in Saltillo, and got to see a lot of incredible scenery down there, and started getting more and more into landscapes and nature photography, just whatever was around in the natural world. It got too dangerous with the cartels in 2009. We couldn't get insurance for our vehicles, for our workers, any of that. And so at that point, Africa opened up for me, and I'm still pinching myself. The trip I just got back from was my 20th trip to Kenya. I had to wait 3 years to do that. We had tickets in 2020, and then the world changed when COVID hit. So finally I got number 20, and now somebody will challenge me to 25, and I'll have to say yes. But at least I've got an even number under my belt now. As I progressed with the Africa trips, I started buying super zooms, Canon, Nikon, and Sony, and I liked all of them, 10, 20, 30, 40 time zoom as they got better and better. And those were pretty neat, but they just weren't really up to what a DSLR could do with interchangeable lenses and the vibration reduction. And as I got more and more into seeing what the equipment would do, I finally got a prosumer or maybe consumer camera, a Nikon D500. And the funny thing about that was it was red, because I had a red point and shoot that was a Nikon, and I had a red super zoom. And so when I met Rob White the first time at Mills Pond in 2014, I saw a guy with a big lens, and we started talking because we're both very shy. And I told him that red cameras took better pictures. I'm not so sure if he believed me or not, but I've always had black ones ever since. I got into wildlife cameras, Nikon D7200, 7500, D500, and now a Z62 mirrorless. I've kind of forced myself to use that as my day-to-day camera to get used to it and to find all the quirks and the ins and outs of that. But I don't always track the birds or the animals as well as I would with the D500 DSLR. But when I get a killer shot, it is a killer shot. I mean, it's a full frame. It's a much better camera. The low light performance is absolutely incredible. So it's been quite a journey. I'm probably shooting close to 100,000 pictures a year now. And I've gotten a very good workflow where I can go through them very quickly, like Josh does with wedding photography, or anybody that has to shoot massive amounts to get what they want. You know, you weed it down to, you know, maybe 10 or 20% that's really worthwhile. But you've got to be out there shooting. How I got to shoot so much was I had a friend named Judy Sawyer that was a officer in the Audubon Society, and she ran the Westgate Pet and Bird Hospital for years. They were one of my computer clients. And she had done a 365-day challenge to do at least one nature photo a day on Facebook during 2014. And she challenged me to do 2015. And you're right, Clay, I haven't missed a day since January 1st of 2015. Sometimes I've been in Africa and haven't had internet, but I'm never going to run out of pictures. There's no problem with that. And I do makeup episodes. I call it my daily diversion. And I post on a lot of the nature sites. I'm with the North American Nature Photography Association. They've got a strong code of ethics where they don't take pictures of captive animals or bait animals or do all the nasty tricks that people will do out there to get that shot. I think it's more of a sport to do it for real. Yeah, it's a lot harder. You get eaten alive by bugs, you know, heat, everything else, but it's much more satisfying when you do get that shot. So anyway, with all of that said, I think I'll get into my pictures, and a few more stories will happen with that. I'll share my screen now. And let's see, this should do it right here. Is that working?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, so what I'm going to start out with, I've got kind of a potpourri of things in several different categories. But I'm going to start out with my most recent trip to Africa in late May, early June. And let me see here. Slideshow is not advancing.
Is that Africa?
No, that's Mills Pond here in the Wells Branch. Here we go. So this is one of our vision clinics. That's why we go. We we saw 2,400 people Monday through Friday in Nairobi. We work in the slums in Nairobi. You'll see almost nobody is wearing a mask. The health department that we work with, the National Health Department, wanted us to wear masks. This is a protocol, so we did. I still ended up getting COVID and spent an extra week. That's a whole nother story at the end of the show. But this is what a clinic looks like when people are waiting to get in. And we do some traffic control outside, and we've learned over the years to only let about 10 or 15 people in the clinic at a time, because that's the way your doctor's office works. So it's not, pandemonium. I mean, people are going to have to wait somewhere, so it might as well be outside. This is one of the first mornings before we got some big tents for people to wait in. The tents were a little bit late. The way a clinic works is first there's a eye chart, that an eye exam for distance vision. And this I can zoom in on a little bit for you. That's not what you see in your optometrist office. It's what they call a flying E, because a lot of people may either be illiterate, which is pretty unusual. The British left behind their school system and everybody speaks Swahili or English, but slums, people come from countries all over Africa to get away from war, poverty, famine, you name it. And so this is pretty easy to do, because you can just have people point which direction that E is going. That green line there, if you have the green or the red line, is 20/20 vision from 20 feet away. That's perfect vision as far as the way we define it. our drivers that drive us on our safaris and around town, every one of them without glasses can read 2010. That's that bottom line. I mean, it just blows my mind they can do it. And, you know, they're not kidding. I mean, we have them do it with one eye, do it with the other, do it with both eyes. They're not joking around. It's pretty amazing stuff. So
They just memorized it.
let me see if I can get out of this. There we go. So once somebody's had an eye exam, then we talk to them about what their eye problems are, why they came in. Anybody over 40 years of age needs reading glasses, no matter where you live in the world. Some people come in with obvious cataracts. Some of them don't pass the eye chart, and then we have to figure out a way to take care of their distance vision for them. And so along with local translators when we need them, most people speak English, we find out exactly what they're going to need from the clinic aspect. And we also talk to them about, we have evangelism outside with local people that are evangelists. We talk to them about if they have any questions about that. This right here is a station where they're distributing reading glasses to people. And it's amazing, your age can tell exactly what your prescription is going to be within one. If you're 40 to 45, it's going to be a 1.0 or a 1.25. If you're say 50 to 55, it might be a 1.75. But you can really narrow it down where you don't have to go through the whole list if you know the person's age, which is on their registration card for the clinic. If somebody fails the eye chart test and it's not real bad, we've got 2 machines that are $5,000 battery operated, where you can you still hear me? My microphone changed for some reason.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, well, anyway, we can aim at each eye, and if this machine gets a good reading, down here where my cursor is, my mouse, if you can see that, there are infrared printers where we can print out a prescription and we can make glasses right on the spot. The other thing we're doing a lot of now is we're doing what they call negative readers. They're like reading glasses where they're the same on both eyes, but they're for distance. And most people's eyes are almost the same or the same, and that's a lot cheaper and easier to do than custom-made glasses. These are our doctors with the health department that distribute medicines for eye infections, itchy eyes, and they also refer people for cataracts. That's the thing that really excites me. We always take enough money, $1,500 for 50 people to get one eye done for a cataract. It's real surgery. And because we hadn't been there in 3 years, every night I had to call my pastor back in Austin and say, I need 25 more, I need 25 more. And we ended up, 97 people are walking around now that were blind, are able to see now, which is just, that's what really gets me going every time. It's part of what motivates me to continue to do this. This is the station where distance glasses are being made, and usually our local volunteers are better at it than we are. We've still got an inventory over there of lenses and frames to make more glasses, but we're slowly weaning away from that and going more towards those pre-made glasses. And then if somebody, when we run out of supplies, we'll probably pay for somebody to go get glasses. It'll be cheaper and less logistics. So finally, this is my friend Barack that I met in 2009 when he was about 16 or 17 years old. He was in a ministry that took care of street boys, mostly boys. There's some girls that are out on the street, no parents. They're either abandoned or the family can't take care of them, and they're either going to die of a drug overdose or gangs or violence, or the police might kill them off just for sport. You never know. I mean, it's pretty vicious. And we're part of a ministry over there that rescues these street kids, gets them into school, trains them up, and now he's running that ministry. He's almost 30 now, and he's got a little beautiful little 4-year-old boy, and he's married, and just an incredible story. And we're dear friends. So that's part of why I do it too, is the relationships we make over a long term. We do short-term missions, but we do long-term commitment. So that's enough about the clinic. I can do a whole 2 hours on that easily. Anyway, every trip we get to do a photo safari. The first Saturday morning, we're there at the Nairobi Game Park, which is next to the airport. And if you're facing the wrong way, you might get a giraffe with a jet taking off behind it, which is kind of a cool picture. You might have skyscrapers in the background, but if you're facing the other way, this place is pretty big. You can drive around there for probably 10 or 12 hours and never end up going to the same places. This is what's called an African widow bird. It's usually in flight almost 100% of the time. This is a real rare shot to get one perched, and it was perched for all of about 2 seconds. But they're floating just above the grass and just above the small bushes, and they look like they've got a long black widow's dress on as they float over the field. So that's why it's called a widow bird. It's just really cool with that red head and everything. This guy here is called a fat knees, is the common term for him. You see those big yellow knees that he's got. He's a ground bird that just grazes on the ground. That was a lifer for me. That's what birders call a bird that they've never seen in their life. I've got over 500 species that I've identified now in Kenya alone. So it's pretty amazing, some of these safaris I've been on. These are a very iconic bird here called the crowned crane. You see them a lot on nature shows. They've got that beautiful kind of golden crown that's sticking up, and they're very colorful, and they're almost always on the ground. Anyway, that's one of the highlights when you see these guys. You don't always see them every time. This is called a little bee eater. There's 4 or 5 different kinds of bee eaters with different color patterns, but that's exactly what they do, is eat bees and small insects. And they're always very colorful, and they're not much bigger than one of our, maybe a wren, like a Carolina wren. I love this shot. You've got a crocodile there, and it looks like this yellow-billed stork is, I don't know what he's doing, giving him a massage, disturbing him. He's got a Egyptian goose looking on. I love witty captions. I'm thinking maybe something like, "I'll give you half an hour to stop doing that." You know, it's who knows. That was from probably 200 yards away. It's great to have a big lens. I didn't want to be anywhere near that. So once we finished the clinic, we went out to Amboseli, which is on the Tanzanian border. I'd never been there before. It's where the elephant and the wildebeest and the zebra migrations start from to go to the Masai Mara, which is another famous game park that straddles the Tanzania and Kenyan border several hundred miles away. So this has always been on my list because it's right at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro. I got to be in this area one time before, and it was all clouded in. I never got to more than closer than 20 kilometers away. We had the blessing of our dear friend Catherine, who runs our project for us over there. We're actually a nonprofit here in the States. We've got our own project that does this, and we've got an NGO, a non-governmental organization, a nonprofit in Kenya that she runs for us. She was able to book first-class train fare for about an hour and a half, 2-hour train ride, so that our drivers met us only about an hour and a half away from where the safari was. We had to drive all the way back to town on the way back, so we had to get tested for COVID before we could fly out that night. But this was first class, and she found out that regular ticket was $3 in American money. First class that we got to do was $8. So we were in real tall cotton when we did this. So this is our team with our team picture, and this is a rarity. Mount Kilimanjaro not clouded in. They're having drought conditions right now, just like us, and what they consider extreme heat, which is around 90. But very dry, very dusty. And so we were probably, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 miles away. We had to pull over to, I told everybody how rare this was. We had 2 vehicles. We had a Land Rover and a Toyota van, both with pop-up tops, so you can stand up and do your photography, but not get eaten by a lion. So we got into the game park that afternoon after we had a good lunch. This is a close-up of a water buck. And there is water in the park. They've got a spring-fed lake called Lake Amboseli. And so with these drought conditions, it was actually an advantage for us photographers because all the wildlife is closer to the water when it's not wet everywhere. And the grass wasn't growing real well either, so we were able to see cheetahs and other things that normally would be hidden in tall grass during a rainy season. This is called a black-winged kite, which is the British left behind all their naming conventions. They call a lot of their hawks and falcons kites. So this is a gorgeous bird. He's about the size of one of our kestrels. We were blessed to see 4 cheetahs, and I think that they're cubs. I think they're young. They were on the prowl. There's gazelles around. I'm sure that, you know, they're hunting in a pack to try and sneak up on something, but that's something that I've only seen cheetahs maybe 3 times out of 20 trips. It's not a real usual thing. This bird here is called a lilac-breasted roller. And that's one of the most beautiful birds in the world. And that's in its mating plumage. I'll show you another one a little later in the slideshow. That's the way they normally look. But this is like the difference a wood duck is here between right now when they're molted and they look terrible in the summer, and when they look great and they're a sharp dressed man in November, December, and January when they're strutting their stuff for the ladies. But yeah, this is really special that I got a close up of one of these guys. This guy here is called a crowned lapwing. He's a ground bird that mostly grazes on the ground. I got some pictures of one of these, a female with a bunch of little babies, but on the notice that I had, I've got about 5,000 pictures from this trip, and I've only been through a couple thousand. This one here is called a yellow-throated spur fowl. That's one that's also almost always on the ground. I've only seen them in flight 1 or 2 times in all of my experience, but they're a real pretty bird. This is Ride-'em Cowboy. I thought this was pretty cool. This baboon with, you know, mama with baby just looks real nonchalant there, like it's just another day at the office. And the look that I got in the eyes, I was really fortunate to get that on this shot. I only got a couple of shots and one of them turned out pretty well. This is a Grant's gazelle. They've got 2 or 3 kinds of gazelles throughout all of Kenya. This one is more prevalent along the Tanzanian border. That's a young buck. The young bucks all fight every year to be the alpha male, and then the male gets all of the females, and the young bucks end up being like teenage boys at a dance. They can't get a date, and then they got to wait till next year to get their chance. So it's kind of interesting. This is a rarity. This is from probably 300 yards away, but this is 2 of those crested or those crowned cranes in flight down there near Tanzania. First time I've ever seen them in flight. So yeah, evidence shots sometimes are worth posting, even if they're not the greatest shot. It's something you just don't see. You don't see it. I mean, it's amazing I got to see that. And this is a female ostrich. You know, we saw a few males around, but I got up close and personal right near sunset. So we got the real nice golden hour light on that shot. This is from the park where we're much closer to Mount Kilimanjaro. You know, I know people have gone to that area, you know, many times and never seen it. It's always been clouded in. So that's really special that we got that. This is a African spoonbill. It looks a whole lot like our roseate spoonbill that we see down on the coast here in Texas. And then next to it is a sacred ibis that is just a beautiful bird in flight, but they both are shorebirds. This, I've never seen this many yellow-billed storks, not a snork, storks lined up like this. I don't know why. They were probably there because there was a little bit of water in that area. It was a main thing, but all on the ground like that. That's kind of an odd thing too. This is the first hippo that we spotted near the water, and we've got cattle egrets on the ground there. But I got a hold of my driver, who's he graduated university with a biology degree, and he knows every animal, plant, and bird and flower. He's unbelievable. I said, I know this guy on top here has got black feet and black legs and a black bill instead of yellow. I think it's a little what's called a little egret over there. We would call it similar to our snowy egret here. But he confirmed that I was actually right. So I actually got one right. I've got a book that's about 600 pages here. It's Birds of Kenya and Tanzania. And the guides all use the same book. So when we're out and we get something rare, they'll say that's on page 64, picture number 3, and I'll write that down. It makes it easier when I get back. Here we've got a buffalo with a, that is a cattle egret on his back. They've got a symbiotic relationship. They eat the bugs and stuff off of the herd animals. There's also little birds called oxpeckers that do the same thing on the elands, the gazelles, any of the water bucks, any of the herd animals. This I just love. I didn't know that so many pink flamingos had migrated from central Kenya down to the border. I mean, this is just absolutely incredible with perfectly still water on Mount Kilimanjaro in the background, and the clouds are starting to form, but you can still see it. So I think that makes this one pretty cool. The animals always have the right of way. And so this hippo decided to cross the road, and so everybody came to a stop. I love the fact that because we do mission work, and a lot of times we have college kids and school teachers that come and don't have a big budget, we always go at the very end of the off season, not during the tourist season. And so the advantage of that is I got my round trip airfare for less than $800. And I was able to get 3 days in a 4-star lodge for my couples for $800 a piece, and $200 a piece for our transportation, including our drivers. So each couple only had to pay $1,000 for about a 3.5 day experience. It might be 5,000 on up if you book it from here, plus your travel. And everybody goes during the high season, which starts after July 1st. And that's great, but then you've got 400 vans and Range Rovers all around the watering holes. And I don't want that picture. I think it's great that all the pictures I get are like I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and there's only a van in my picture if I want there to be one. And our downside is if it's a little rainy, the grass is tall and we don't see as much as the people do. When they come during the migrations, the grass either gets eaten or beaten down, trampled down. And so you'll have a better chance of seeing a leopard or a cheetah. But I think I'll take not being on Mopac on my vacation. There's times where it takes 8 hours to get into one of these game parks. I don't want to go halfway around the world to sit in line. I mean, that's crazy. So this guy in this Land Rover, this Toyota that's in the background there, he broke the rules and got too close to these wildebeest, and they're all fleeing from him. That's a big no-no. Our driver called him in, called in on him. I mean, they can turn each other in for doing stuff like that, but it is kind of a cool action shot. I just got to find a way to clone this rear view mirror out of here where it's not so good, but given the time constraints I had, that's what I got. I still thought it was kind of interesting to show that. This is up close and personal on a pink flamingo. They feed like this. It's always good on a shorebird like this. It has tall legs. I learned this from a National Geographic friend of mine named Graham Simpson, that if you have a big honking foot in the air, one of the feet in the air, it's a wow shot. If they're standing on 2 stilts, it's a bird standing there on 2 stilts. So you could have exactly the same shot, but that makes it a much better shot with that 1 foot raised up like that. I waited a while for that. They don't have very big eyes to try and get a gleam in the eye or a catch light, but it is what it is. This is a wildebeest crossing the water in front of all of these pink flamingos with the mountain in the background, getting clouded up even more as this picture is taken. This guy here is called a black-winged stilt. And he looks like he's got long legs there, but when he lifts up out of the water, his legs are about 4 times as long as what that is from the water to his body. That's why they call them stilts. It really does look like stilts. The first time you see one lift up and fly out of the water, you can't believe how long these legs are. There's many different varieties of black legs, yellow legs, other kinds. This is probably the most common one. This is real special. This is kind of like the blast off of the snow geese when you're in Bosque del Apache or Roswell, New Mexico. This is a blast off of pink flamingos. In all the years I've gone, I've caught a couple of them in flight, maybe one at a time or sometimes a pair, never anything like this. And I got a whole burst where I had probably 100 shots in a burst, and here's 3 shots that kind of show the cool patterns that happen as they kind of weave in and out. And that's a little more of the whole group. That group was probably 4 times the width of this picture with how many birds there were. Just unbelievable. The whole crew decided to move over to the other side of the lake. These are wildebeest, kind of like this one for the reflection. This guy here is called a malachite kingfisher. He's very tiny, about like a wren, but he is a kingfisher. So he's got the big kingfisher beak and the big kingfisher head. And yes, he does dive down from a reed like that down into the water and catches fish. So he's one of, there's another one called the African pygmy that's very colorful kingfisher that I didn't see this trip. These are a couple of Egyptian geese. We have those here in Austin. They're not native here. They are from Egypt and Africa, but they've been in zoos and other places around the US and escaped, or people let them go, and they can live almost anywhere in the world. So they're all over the place now. This is something pretty incredible. You may have to look a little close, but you've got 6 lions all going across the plain here, starting from the right-hand side of the picture all the way over to the left. They're all in one long line. And they eventually head to a big clump of bushes where there's 2 males and some adult females there. I think they're out on one of their first hunts, maybe as cubs on their own. This is a female, full-grown female lion that we found. And here she is with her mate. And that was kind of an interesting story. When we first found them, they were laying down near each other, and he wanted to go find another female, and she didn't want anything to do with that. So she kept following him around. He kept roaring at her. He would lay down now and then and hope she'd go to sleep, and they'd try and sneak off. We probably watched him for about 45 minutes. He never did get away. So the hippos were in the edge of Lake Amboseli. Some of those are babies, and they usually hang around in the water because their skin is very sensitive to the sun. They will get sunburned, so when they're out of the water, they will take a dust bath. Elephants do that too. It's their version of sunscreen. So here's an elephant that's all sunscreened up. They'll stir up a bunch of dust with their trunk, and they'll all do it together as a family and get all dusty like that. This is the white-faced whistling duck, which is similar to the whistling ducks that we have out at Murphy Park and Taylor or other places around Texas. They do whistle when they fly, but they look completely different, almost like a Canada goose as far as the way their head looks. More hippos and more waterfowl right near there. I guess they don't step on them. This is called an African fish eagle. It's very similar in appearance to our bald eagle, and about 100% of their diet is fish. I think they will get a small mammal or a rodent or something if they have to, but for the most part, it's fish. These are yellow-billed. I'm sorry, these are pelicans. These are, see, we call them American pelicans here. I think they call them great white pelicans there. Pelicans anywhere in the world, when they're in the air, I love the names of groups. In the air, they're called a squadron. So that's a squadron. And amazingly enough, this same group, a second later, was in that formation. Pretty amazing how quickly they did that. And the guy in the back there didn't get the memo. He's trying to catch up. So here's one of those fish eagles in flight coming right at me. I was very fortunate to get that shot. This looks a little bit like our Prolaxia, which is kind of a cardinal cousin in New Mexico, or like one of our cardinals, but it's called a blue naped mouse bird. And I had to ask my guy in Africa what that was. I couldn't find it in the book, but kind of a striking looking creature. You know, we got a baboon in the top of one of the, oh, it's gonna drive me nuts. I've gone blank on the tree that the giraffes eat. The iconic tree of Africa. Anyway, he's up there doing what he's doing with Mount Kilimanjaro in the background. So I thought that was kind of cool. And there's another a little guy over there to the right. This one here is a white-headed buffalo weaver. There's tons of different kinds of weavers, like we have warblers. They make nests that are kind of a big ball, and they have a hole in the bottom of it. The entrance is in the bottom so that predators can't get them. And then there's one called the social weaver that builds a huge one that maybe 15 or 20 birds will be in instead of only a pair. And they actually build shelves in there to put the eggs on. So it's a really fascinating bird. They'll weave stuff together like colorful string, pieces of plastic bags that they find, whatever. So some of these nests could be very colorful when they're in an urban area, not so much out here at a game park. This is also a lilac-breasted roller. Remember that really stunning bird that was in the mating plumage? This is what they normally look like. So what a difference. I mean, a complete transformation. And we've got a young hyena with a kill. You can see a little blood on his chin. And this is towards the end of our second day. We had another full day. I did about 1,400 pictures a day. And I was blessed that some of my team wanted to do tourist stuff or sleep in. And so the second and the third day, I got a vehicle all to myself with my driver that's an absolute naturalist. So, I mean, I couldn't have been happier about that. That's pretty incredible. In fact, the second day, we found hyenas on a kill where there was 18 hyenas we counted in one picture. There were jackals and there were wild dogs as well, feral dogs. And the smaller animals like the feral dogs and the jackals were just kind of hanging around trying to get scraps when the hyenas would get a little bit distracted. One final shot of Kilimanjaro as it clouds up. That's getting a little bit more like the pictures you normally see. So that's the end of Africa there. This is the start of Bosque del Apache last fall with Stephen Burkich, Jim Smith. We had Sabrina there and a couple of other friends. And what I normally do is I drive to Roswell because I went on a Jeff Parker photo workshop in 2018. And I was driving by myself and I didn't want to drive 12 hours to Bosque. So I figured out that Roswell was 8 hours and there's a national wildlife refuge there called Bitter Lake with a big water feature, hiking trails. They've got the lesser sandhill cranes instead of the larger ones that they have at Bosque. And they've got snow geese that do a blast off as well. And nobody is there. I mean, you're out there by yourself. I kind of like it better than Bosque myself instead of being among 3,000 other photographers during the high season. So these are the lesser sandhill cranes coming in at sunset. This is a northern harrier, one of my favorite raptors. They've always got the juvenile males and the females have that white stripe on the tail right behind the wings on the top of the tail. And this is definitely a female or a juvenile male looks like that until they get older. These are red-winged blackbirds taken off in a huge swarm. They're kind of like the nice golden hour light in this one. This is one that I placed with in one of our photo contests a few months ago. We didn't plan this. Usually we use photo pills and all these, like Stephen and Josh and all the guys do for astrophotography. And you know the angle of the moon at such and such a time, and it's going to be right above the UT tower or whatever you're going to do. And we had a super moon come up that we didn't know about right at sunset. So the sun is at our back, the moon is in front of us, and the birds are all coming into roost on a little water feature that's off of the main body of water where they can stand in the water. They do that to be protected against the land predators like coyotes and wolves. So they're pretty well protected out on the water. Here's some more at sunset as the colors are changing. I kind of like the pastels and the clouds in this one. This is a blast off of snow geese, I believe, the next morning at Roswell. And we've got some more of those lesser sandhill cranes in formation. Now this is the adult male northern harrier. That's called the gray ghost. And I used to think that only 1 out of 8 northern harriers were a male. I couldn't figure that out. I didn't know that they're kind of like a snow owl. They don't turn until they're maybe a year or 2 or 3 years old. And these are the only guys, just like those gazelles that we saw, that get the dates. They're the ones that get to take a girl to the dance. The young ones don't. And it's I think it's almost impossible. I don't know if a trained naturalist can tell the difference between an immature male and a female until they turn. But this is just a striking bird. And to get one of these in flight, it was my goal. And I got it right when we got to Bosque. I thought I'd be working for 2 days. And it was right in about the first 45 minutes we were there. This is a female or an immature male landing. One of the larger sandhill cranes that they have at Bosque. This is a bear. I didn't know that they had bears at Bosque.
He's a guy.
Not sure if it's a brown bear or a grizzly, but he's
Looks
mean.
like a green bear.
Grizzly.
Grizzly?
It's a rhinoceros or elephant with that trunk in front.
Yeah, could be, yeah. So you can see the water
Grizzly
feature
rhinoceros?
there. It's mostly prairie there. It's kind of neat to be in a different ecosystem than what you're used to. I went up to the Panhandle during COVID and got out into Muleshoe is the biggest prairie national wildlife refuge in the country. Teddy Roosevelt set it up. And I signed in at a bird observation deck. All the visitor stations were closed because volunteers run them and they weren't there during COVID. But I signed in on a clipboard on a Tuesday when I got there at an observation deck with my name, my license number, and I was there to do nature photography. And before I left on Thursday, I signed in on the next line. And I'm going, oh my God, if something happened to me out here, the vultures would take care of it. And then I had a nice thought, what better thing for a nature photographer? What better karma? Just go back to the food chain. That's cool. So here's some sandhill cranes coming in at sunset at Bosque, or no, it's a sunrise, I think. I'm sorry. Another sandhill crane that's kind of backlit. Sometimes shooting into the sun will yield some kind of strange results. And this is one that I think I placed with when we got back. This is a northern harrier lifting off. And there's quite a story behind this picture. All of us got this picture from an observation deck. This couldn't have been more than 50 feet away from us. We're doing all of this with big lenses. It was hard not to chop the wings off. We were so close when it lifted off. And Stephen forced me to Photoshop out all the bird poop. They perch on this all the time. I wanted to leave it natural, but he won. So that's, and this is the crew that was at Bosque. Patty Mitchell was with us too, Rob White. This is the 2018 trip. They weren't there for all the pictures you saw there were from 2021, but we did a trip in 2019 together. So we did a serious picture, and this is the serious one, and then we did the goofy one after that. So now we've got a little bit around Central Texas. This is a bird perched on a bird. That's our friend Donna Smith. And she knows, like we all know, that they can go for your eyes, and she didn't have any glasses on, so she stayed right on the camera. That bird perched on the end of her lens. It was on her shoulder. We got a whole series. It was pretty cool. It's a Eastern Phoebe. So this is a Pedernales Falls. I called this one Ride 'em Cowboy. This titmouse, when he spread his wings a little bit, had identical colors to this gray fox. If you look at his wings, he's got a little bit of orange under the wing. He's gray like that. And he rides them around. I think it's a symbiotic thing too, or maybe you get some bugs out of the deal. I call this one belly up to the bar. This armadillo went after the bird bath to get himself a drink. This one was at Rockport with Donna and Stephen and Jim Smith. And I called this one, Did You Remember the Milk? As Dad is coming in. This one I think I entered a couple months ago. It's not the greatest shot, but something you don't see all the time. It's a scissor-tail flycatcher going after a crow that I thought it had its baby. I called it Drop That Baby, but it's actually a dove squab. I found out the baby doves are called squabs. So you always learn something. When you post something and you misidentify it on a nature site, you will find out you're wrong. Here's a couple of cell phone pictures that I did at Berry Springs. And I placed with one of these because I took the metadata out of it so the judges wouldn't know it was a cell phone picture. It's pretty amazing what you can do now with a newer phone. There was a little Photoshop involved, but not a lot. This is, we visited Donna out at, a bunch of us went out to Lago when she moved out there this spring. We were out there for the vermilion flycatchers, which are beautiful birds, but we got lucky and a scissor-tail was buzzing the bluebonnets. And I thought that came out kind of cool. This is kind of the highlight of my last 2 or 3 months. This is a couple months ago on Lake Georgetown. This bird is still there. It's called a brown booby. And they're supposed to be nowhere in the continental United States, rarely on the California or Florida coast, very rarely on the Texas coast. And this is a juvenile. We're not sure if it's a male or a female. 3 months later, it's still there. I got pictures of it in flight last week from my boat on Lake Georgetown. Several of our members like Sabrina have been out there with me to get pictures of this in flight. And he's got the big webbed feet. There's a blue-footed booby that's pretty famous too. These birds are out on islands in the ocean is where they roost and breed, and they don't have any natural predators. But now man is coming along and starting to inhabit some of these islands. And the things that come along with human populations like rats and other nasty stuff are predators on their eggs. And so they are not endangered yet. I think that they're protected though. But this is, so he looks so prehistoric with that bill. I mean, it looks like some kind of dinosaur. And somehow he's figured out he's a saltwater bird, but he's looking healthy after 3 months. So he's found a way to eat somehow. So that's your lesson in that. I've been out 6 or 7 times since this picture was taken. Got him in flight, all kinds of, we can get up close and personal. He's not really too afraid of people if you don't spook him. This one I entered, I think last month, and people didn't realize that's a baby turtle. I called that baby on baby. And I think that the baby yellow-crowned night heron ended up losing and the turtle won the day. He was never able to crack the shell or get him down the hatch. And I think he finally gave up. I must have watched him for half an hour. He kept dropping it, picking it up, trying a different way to swallow it. He just couldn't do it. So, you know, baby on baby. Painted bunny that I entered last month. I love these birds. That's God's rainbow and a bird. I mean, people go, where did you see that bird in Africa? I go, they're right here in Austin. It's pretty amazing. In fact, it should be our state bird. They breed here and they go back to Mexico and Central America. I think where you're born is where you should be from, but birders don't do that. Where they go to winter is where they say a bird is from. It's never made sense to me. This is out at Murphy Park in Taylor. I called this one Elvis. He's got the hairdo. He's got it all going. That's a male Muscovy duck. He's really, really ugly. This is Woody, our wood duck at Mills Pond. One tip that I have for nature photographers is find somewhere close to home and make a daily study of it. I do that because of my, trying to post pictures every day. But Rob White, Donna Smith and I, Jim, Stephen, A bunch of us spend a fair amount of time there, and then we know where the nests are before the leaves come out. We know where to find which particular species in the woods, where they're going to be, what season. It makes a huge difference in being able to be successful in not only finding your subject, but getting it in some kind of behavior shot where it's more interesting. Anyway, Woody, the wood duck, has got to be somewhere between 10 and who knows how old. I moved to Wells Branch in 2015, but I was going there in 2014, so there's 8 years. He just got back. He leaves for 2 or 3 months in the summer every year, and we think he goes to another pond to try and find love because he's a loner there. But when he comes back, he's molted. I mean, most birds lose all their feathers every year and then get new feathers for mating season. Here he is in January. You would not think that that is the same creature. He looks twice the size with that helmet on his head, all filled out with the mating plumage. I mean, he's a sharp dressed man there, like ZZ Top would say. So that's a pretty shocking thing. A lot of people won't believe it when I post the 2 seasons side by side. Finally, I've gotten into drones over the last 6 or 8 months. I've got about 100 hours in the air. I've got a recreational license with the FAA. I'm registered. I've got a drone that's too heavy not to register. It's got a sensor and a video cam that can do 4K video at 60 frames a second. I've got a whole set of neutral density filters for it for different conditions. And the camera can go up to 48 megapixels, but it's only a 1/2 inch sensor. And so there's another one that's a full 1 inch sensor that's just a little more expensive. One tip for anybody that wants to get into drones, I got this on eBay at the official DJI store. And DJI has what they call the Fly More package, where you get 3 batteries. This will go 34 minutes on each battery. So I get a lot of time. And that would normally be close to $1,300. I bought it refurbished by DJI on their official store on eBay for $800. And I couldn't tell the difference. It had all the stickers on it like a brand new one. I couldn't find a scratch on it. And my understanding is that those units have to be returned within 1 week of the customer getting it, and they don't like it or didn't want to do it for some reason or got buyer's remorse. So I've got the Mavic Air 2. The 2S is about, maybe another $200 or $300 more for a package than this with the 1 inch sensor. But they just came out with the Mavic 3 recently. That Fly More package is about $2,800, but the batteries go 46 minutes each, and it's got a 4/3 sensor. It's got 2 cameras. One of them is a Hasselblad, and the other one is a wide-angle camera for doing panoramas. And it's got much better collision avoidance and all kinds of other stuff in the electronics that may be worth waiting on, but this one's more than adequate. This picture is a sunrise over the pond that's right in my neighborhood. I can get there in 5 minutes. When I look out my window, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a good sunrise starting to happen. So here's one that I took when fog was rolling in during a sunrise a while back, and I did a panorama on that one. As a matter of fact, that I think is either 9 or 15 shots, and you just put it on that setting, and it automatically does it, and it stays that still. It's like having a tripod in the sky. It's unbelievable. I've flown it up to 25-mile-an-hour winds, and it looks like it's bouncing all over in the air. And when you get the pictures, they're rock steady. This is a sunset from my driveway. So I'm no longer vertically challenged. This is about 200 feet up from my driveway. My neighbors all think it's kind of funny. The dogs go nuts when I launch it, but then I get up high enough where they can't hear it anymore. Here's another sunset from above my neighborhood. Here's one as night is starting to fall. I've got a strobe light now on my drone where it's legal now for recreational flyers to fly at night if you have a strobe that can be seen for 4 miles. And I've got one that'll last about 4.5 hours on a battery charge that Velcros to the top of your drone. You can't see it from underneath. It's so aircraft can see you from above. And I've got a landing light that I can turn on the bottom of the drone. It'll lock into 16 or 18 GPSs, and I can take off from one of those little landing pads with an H on it, so I can find it a little easier at night, and it will come back to within 2 or 3 feet of where it took off. I mean, I can do it by hand when I need to, which sometimes you do, but it's still pretty amazing, the technology that I've gotten for $800. This is another sunrise from the pond. One more, I think this is the last sunrise. And then one thing I always like to point out with nature photography or anything like your astrophotography, fireworks, it's always good to do your research and be ready ahead of time. So I found out that most big cities like Chicago, New York, Dallas, probably Austin, your fireworks are at 500 to 1,000 feet up when they explode. But littler areas like Wells Branch, which is where I am, this is the neighborhood display on July 4th, are usually only about 200 feet up. And drone pilots are allowed to fly up to 400 feet if you're not in restricted airspace. So I went for the week before the fireworks during the day and scouted out locations where I thought I would be nowhere near people, because you're not supposed to fly over people. Something bad could happen if it fell out of the sky. I've literally had one of the props cut one of my fingers to the bone. It's not a toy. So it's nothing to play with. I figured out that I could fly right above the Johnson Elementary School and not be above any people, take off from the parking lot behind that where nobody wanted to be. Everybody was in this other parking lot where they could see better, launch it, get up above the school, and be in perfect position at 200 feet to be at eye level with the fireworks. And then I had to figure out what I was going to do for automatic exposures. I knew were not going to work. I finally landed on 10-second exposures where I adjusted the exposure compensation and the ISO a little bit by hand. So this is the first decent shot that I got after about 20 duds. And what I would do is when I would hear the big boom of the firework taking off from about half a mile away is when I would trip the 10-second shutter. And the timing worked out pretty well on these. Ooh, ah. So that is your last firework. And this is ways to get a hold of me if anybody wants to, but I'm in the club. That's easy too. That's all.
Wow. So we want now to talk with you, Dave. So I'm hoping that all those wonderful pictures generated some interest on the part of everybody that's here. We've got 14 people. I expect 14 questions.
Well, Stephen said he's got a
from
whole
each of
page
you.
of them. Stephen told me he's got a whole page of questions for me.
Okay, well, we can go easy so everybody gets a chance.
Have at it.
Wonderful job, Dave. Thank you so much. Let's see what people have questions about.
Let me get in here and thank Clay for recruiting Dave to speak first. It's truly appreciated. And
Thank
for
you.
Dave,
Thanks, Clay.
you told us what body you have, but you didn't talk about your lenses that you preferred.
Oh yeah, I've got a Sigma 150 to 600 that I've had since it came out in 2015, and it's still my go-to. It's the one I walk around with a shoulder harness on so that I don't kill myself with a regular strap. I found that shoulder harness has gotten me more birds in flight than anything else. If you're trying to draw from your hip, you're late. When you see something out of the corner of your eye, you raise up right away from a shoulder harness and you're on it. And if you can lock focus, you get shots you wouldn't have gotten before. That's one tip. And my walking around lens is a 18 to 300 Sigma. My D500 is still a beast of a wildlife camera, but it's got over 300,000 clicks on it. Now, I don't know, the shutter probably isn't that much to replace, but I think everything's going mirrorless, and I think lenses eventually will like Eric Kuna said, I think in his talk, eventually your DSLR lenses that are not designed for mirrorless will lose value pretty quickly. He said it might be a good time to sell them.
I have sold mine. I
Yeah.
have two non-mirrorless lenses. One's the 120 to 300 2.8 Sigma,
Uh-huh.
and the other one is a 1.4 20 Sigma.
We had some severe weight restrictions going to Africa. They dropped your carry-on luggage down from 26 pounds to 17. And I keep all my laptop and all my expensive camera gear in a rollerboard with me. And I had a HEB freezer shopping bag with the Velcro top, where if I had to, I was going to pull it out and put stuff under my seat to make the weight on the rollerboard. So instead of the D500, which is pretty big, I carried a D7500, which is a lot smaller, but it's still a pretty capable camera. I mean, you got to remember that something like the D7500 is probably better than the best pro cameras were 7-8 years ago. You know, it's a pretty much a standard wildlife camera now.
So for getting up early, do you have a tip for how to get up early and when do you would like, is it 4 or 5
Set your
o'clock in the
alarm.
morning?
I set the alarm. I go to bed usually somewhere between 9 and 10. I'm an early bird. I used to be a night owl for years and years and years when I was a party animal, but I haven't drank in 25 years. So when I wake up with a headache, it really is a headache. You know, there is that. You go, wow, I've got a headache.
Yeah, Dave's a slave driver on one of his workshops.
Yeah, he is.
Well, yeah, part of it is you got to know when the sunrise is for sunrises or for getting that golden hour light. One little tip I'll give you that I learned by doing some research is that there's actually 3 sunrises and 3 sunsets every day. There's astronomical sunrise or sunset when the sun is 18 degrees below the horizon, but you're starting to get a little bit of the indigos and the deep oranges in the horizon, where the atmosphere is starting to refract that light. Nautical sunrise and sunset is 6 degrees below the horizon. My understanding is when you got enough light in the sky for navigation on the water. And then what you see in the newspaper is called civil sunrise. That's when it breaks the horizon. And each one of those periods lasts for a few minutes and has completely different qualities as far as the light and the color of the clouds. Most of the drone stuff I'm doing now for sunrise and sunsets, I'm in the air for a full hour. There's about 45 minutes if you're on the ground that I would normally devote to a sunrise or sunset, but I try and get up a little bit earlier than I would be shooting if I was on the ground, and I try and stay up there a little longer, because sometimes when you hit that area between nautical sunset and nautical or astronomical sunset, you get one last set of fireworks in the high clouds that last about 30 seconds to a minute and a half. That's worth the whole thing. And if you miss that, I've been driving home and it's happened. And I'm just, kicking myself. Why didn't I stay another 5 minutes while I was sweating and the bugs were biting me? There's a lot of that in nature too. People don't get to see that.
Have you experienced wind picking up at sunrise? I've seen it
Yeah,
disturb
maybe
lakes.
after sunrise. A lot of times it's very calm at sunrise. You saw some of those were mirror smooth on some of the sunrises I did with the drone. In fact, if I fly the drone below about 25 feet, I get down to get a good reflection. Sometimes it'll start stirring up the water a little bit from there.
So Dave, when you're doing your wildlife photography, do you have your settings are you consistent with your settings? Do you have an f-stop that you like all the time? How do you catch those and get them really sharp and clear?
Okay, well, what I landed on over a lot of years was I started out an aperture priority, like a lot of people recommend. And then it's automatically doing your ISO and your shutter speed. And if you've got a high enough aperture, like a f8 to f11, you got a pretty good chance of a sharp picture, but then you're not in control of anything. And my mentor and dear friend, Rob White, has always shot manual, and it's taken me a long time to get to that point. I did do shutter priority for a while because I was doing so much in the way of birds in flight that the shutter was actually more important to me, and let the ISO and the aperture float. Now what I've landed on, my go-to settings, I learned this from Jeff Parker, is we never have enough light early in the morning or late in the evening when the animals or the birds are coming in to roost, or they're flying out for the day, or the animals are starting to move. So you shoot wide open when you don't have much light. So you might be at f4, f4.5, f5, whatever the widest your lens will do. And then you're going to be stuck with high ISO. But now there's a lot of good software like Topaz and On1 that are very good at removing noise and helping you with your sharpness. So my go-to settings now, to get back to your question, are I'm shooting manual, and I'm setting the shutter speed and the aperture for what I'm trying to achieve. If I want a blurred out background, it'll be a smaller number on the aperture, a wider opening. If I want something that's sharp from my feet all the way to the horizon, it'll be a higher aperture, like even f16 or so. I'll do the shutter speed based on whether it's maybe a bird sitting on a branch, might be 200, 250, 320, not too high. But I can roll the shutter up very quickly on that back dial if I think it's going to fly to maybe 1,000th, 1250th, a 1600th of a second. I like to have a little blur in the wings when they're taking off. Or hummingbirds, I think look stupid if you do a 4,000th of a second and it's hanging there like a helicopter with a stop prop. I'd rather have a little bit of a blur. So what I've landed on, and I don't know if everybody would go along with this, I do auto ISO. And my mirrorless camera will go from 50 to, gosh, with going to black and white, maybe 128,000. But you can set a range on that depending on how much noise your sensor can handle. The older sensors don't handle noise near as well as the new ones now. But I set mine to go from 50 to 25,000, even 50,000. And then I worry about it later. And my theory is that it may have some noise in it, but at least I got the shot.
Yeah, you've been
And I'll
talking
play
to
with the-
Josh.
I'm sorry, what?
You've been talking to Josh.
Well, I'm
Get
not
the
sure
shot.
if he was always that way. You know what? Wildlife photography is hard. And he came with us one time for 4 hours at Mills Pond with me and Stephen and Donna. We probably had 10 people. And about halfway through the morning, he said, "This is hard." People think we go out and take one picture and get that killer shot with the gleam in the eye and, perfect focus and all that. No way. I mean, I'd love to do that.
Josh totally does that. No.
So Josh is doing that now with the floating his
I'm
ISO.
being sarcastic, my friend.
No, Josh is shoot more.
Yeah.
No. You guys missed my sarcasm. He takes like 1 million pictures and gets one.
Well, I used to be spray and pray is what they call that. And I could do 1,000 shots in the morning. I get tired of going through them. And I would love to maybe in another, when you're not sick of me right now, maybe in another 6 months or a year, go through what my workflow is like. Because I can go through 1,000 pictures in about 15 minutes. And I'll rate them with a star rating. And I delete anything that's not rated high enough. And then I go through a second time because now I've seen them all and I know I've got a better one than this one I'm looking at. So that one's gone too. So out of 1,000 pictures, I might get down to 15 or 20% of them are worth looking at again or maybe working on.
That drone strobe you mentioned for night flights, is it heavy?
No, it's very light. It uses a tiny little micro USB to charge it up. It's called Fire Plug or Firehouse is the brand name. There's a bunch of them are rated out there by professional drone guys, and most of them are garbage Chinese knockoffs. But this one gets high ratings. You can do a white strobe that's every so many seconds. You can do it alternates between green, red, and white. I don't know if that's legal or not, but you got 4 or 5 patterns. The one thing I learned on a film from the Pilot Institute, I've learned a lot from them, and I may pay $175 for their course to get the pro lesson or the pro certification, the license, is that you shut one eye when you're turning that strobe on, because it takes you 2 or 3 minutes to get acclimated to the dark, like when you're doing astrophotography or anything else. And if you blind both eyes, you can't see to take off and fly. So you put a patch over one eye or you shut one eye, and then the other one will come back after a while, because you're above it when you're taking off, and that strobe is right in your face. Things you don't think of. I wouldn't have thought of that if I hadn't seen it in a video. I'm glad I knew it before I did it.
Would you buy your drone again or buy that brand again? Do you like it?
Yeah, DJI is very good. The US government almost banned them because they were getting down on China for their phones, and everybody's spying on us. Who knows? It's what's going on, but so far it's good. There is one new regulation that's coming in September of 2023, where all drones above 250 grams, which is the weight limit for having to have it registered with the FAA, are going to have what's called remote ID, which is like a radio signal that tells the FAA who you are and where you are, just like an airplane. Now, when I fly, like I went down to Longhorn Dam one day downtown, and I wanted to fly around the dam and get some pictures of the skyline from there, from maybe a couple 100 feet up. There's an app on your phone that ties right into the FAA, and you request permission to fly. When you're near an airport airspace is like an upside down wedding cake. The farther away you are from the airport, the higher you're allowed to fly. If you're like a Cessna pilot or whatever. But as a drone pilot, you can't go above 400 feet above where you took off from. And so I got on this app, and it's an automated system, no controllers involved, requested permission, a Google map comes up, you draw a square where you plan on flying and a 2-hour period that you plan on flying. And right away, you either get permission or you don't. And it came back and told me you can fly for the next 2 hours in that area, but you can't go above 200 feet. So then I was legal. Now, I might not have been legal for that park. Like, you're not allowed to fly in Williamson County parks. So there's local regulations you got to worry about too. But if I know that I'm in unrestricted airspace and I've checked it out with the FAA and I'm registered and everything, I've got a pretty good argument if some guy who doesn't know what he's doing tries to ticket me. So far, no problems, but it's going to happen, especially if I'm with Steven. That stuff always happens with Steven.
What are some of your favorite places in Texas that are outside of Williamson and Travis counties for bird photography?
I like Hagerman Wildlife Refuge. I've done that 3 or 4 times during COVID. That's on the Oklahoma border. It's on a finger of Lake Texoma. They've got walking trails there. There's eagles that are resident there. I stay in Sherman or Denison for about $50 a night. It's a dark sky area, so if you have a clear sky one night, I've done some astrophotography there. So it's only 4 hours away on the nose. You go straight through Dallas up 35 and get on to 75 in Dallas, and you're there. So I can drive up early in the morning, get a whole afternoon in there, get a hotel room, take a nap, do nighttime photography if I want. Then I usually spend either one more full day there and a night, and then come back. And so I usually go during the week because I run a little computer repair company, but I got guys working for me, and I really don't want to deal with weekends and crowds. So a lot of times I'm the only one in a place like that. During COVID, I went out to the Panhandle about 8 hours away, Muleshoe that I mentioned before, Buffalo Lake, and Grulla, Grulla. It's a wildlife refuge that straddles the New Mexico border. They're all within about 40 minutes of each other. So I stayed in Muleshoe, and I spent 3.5 days, and I went to all 3 of them twice. And it's amazing, all the bugs and lizards and different kinds of birds and everything. If you're there at dawn and at dusk, that's when wildlife is usually moving around, or coming in to roost for the night or leaving for the morning. And that's why you got to miss a lot of dinners and a lot of breakfast and a lot of a lot of sleep in order to do it right. I mean, I have people want to go out to Mills Pond with me at noon during the, when the migration's starting to come. And I go, yeah, that's great, but you're not going to see anything. Well, I don't want to get up. Well, then this is not for you.
Do you have something scheduled on Meetup or talk to Kathy Smith?
No, I generally do my own trip to, I went with Jeff Parker in 2018 and did that Bosque trip. And it's like when you go fishing on new water, I'll hire a guide for a trip, but I really don't need him anymore after that. And Jeff has taught me a lot when I was beginning. I mean, he's good. He's a good instructor. And when he lived in Smithville, that was great. He could, he would do like painted bunting workshops and macro and flowers and all kinds of stuff at his place. He had bird blinds. But like I said, once I've gone to the coast with him for Port A for the whipping cranes. But after I did that, I went with Andrew once. And when he was doing that with precision, just because I wanted to be in a workshop with him, it wasn't so much that I needed a guide. And he was going with the same captain that I use anyway. So I was comfortable with that. And I've used that same captain now with Stephen and Donna and others 3 or 4 years in a row. So I'll generally put together a smaller group that guy's got 2 boats, he and his wife, that'll each hold 6 photographers, 3 on the bottom deck, 3 on the top with tripods. So you could have a group as big as 12 and do that, but I don't know. I think my role in the group has always been to be kind of a scout, go out and scout things out ahead of time, find good places. And then I can't hear and I can't see. So I've got younger people that do that and they point where it is and then I get the shot. So, you should get a little smarter when you get older, right?
Hasn't worked for me.
Well, if we meet you at Mills Pond, is that something possible for?
Well, I'd be happy to do a guided tour of Mills Pond, and Rob and I
5
are
a.m.
resident there. We're kind of the resident guides, and when new birders come around or whatever, we're happy to show them anything that's not going to disturb the wildlife. Like there's things like hummingbird nests that are active that you don't want to screw up, and everybody and their brother will be there trampling on them. We had a female kingfisher at the pond last year during breeding season, and people were coming out in waders and trying to get to her, just total harassment, which is against that whole set of ethics I talk about that's in the North American Nature Photographers Association. I mean, everybody's got their own limit. Some people won't call a bird with a call with a Bluetooth speaker with their phone. I'll do that when I know I'm not disturbing the mating season. That's how I get a lot of my male painted bunting shots. You'll hear them before you see them, but they don't always come out. You play the same song that they're singing, and most people don't know this, but they're not monogamous. They've got 4 or 5 or 6 females with nests. And so if another male comes into the area, they're very territorial. They want to see who that is. And if you play it through a Bluetooth speaker loud, they want to see who that 300-pound painted bunting is. and they'll be 10, 20 feet away from you, but you don't do that all morning. You do it just to get a few shots. And kind of the way I justify that is I'm able to share what I do with people that will never see this. There's people that have never seen a painted bunting that live here. They don't even know they're around. And there is some, skill and knowledge to finding them. That's kind of one other point. I did a talk for the Bastrop Audubon Society right before COVID, and they invited me down because they liked what I was doing with my photos, and they didn't want to hear about the birds. Usually it's, this species or that species or whatever. They wanted to know how I did what I did. And so I had 35 points that I usually teach to the folks that come along with me. And when I got to thinking about it, there's about 35 of them that are important that will make you a much better photographer. One of them is really learning the behavior of your subject. For instance, the osprey is my favorite raptor. It's a seabird. They call it a seahawk in the Northwest. Call it a sea eagle, I think, in Europe. It's the same thing. every time before they're gonna fly, what you wanna do if you're in a boat is get lined up where the wind is blowing in on them. Birds and aircraft always take off into the wind. So if you can get in that position, you're gonna get them just as they're launching right at you. And then you watch them closely, and ospreys almost 100% of the time will lean forwards, then they'll poop, and then they'll take off. And I mean, that's disgusting, but it's what they do. And when I was with Jeff Parker on the Sandhill Cranes at Bosque, he taught me their tell. They're always in a family group, and there's one alpha bird. And when one of the birds dips their head down, a second later, they all start running across the water, getting up speed to take off. And if you can spot that, tell when that one bird does that, you're ready to get them just as they're getting rolling. So it's there is quite a bit of planning, preparation, and then study that goes into really doing it right, and it really makes it a sport. It's a passion. I mean, I'd rather do that than my computer business, but it pays the bill. Nobody buys pictures anymore. They do from Josh.
Who else would like to ask questions? Certainly there's another one out there.
Stephen, I thought you had a whole page full.
Yeah,
There's
you
one in the
answered
chat.
them all.
He's been with me so much, he knows all my stories.
There's a question that in the chat from David Byers.
Okay.
Oh,
How did you find those harriers at Bosque?
They are usually buzzing the fields right above the grass level, you know, the tall grass. And you'll see them buzzing along. And we were there one afternoon. There's several observation decks there. One's called the Scout deck. I think it might have been a Eagle Scout project. And that one where I showed you, the one that was lifting off, where I had to Photoshop the bird poop off of the stump there.
Good call.
It turned out that they really like that area, and they're buzzing the fields behind you, the next field over, and the one in front of you. And they'll make like regular rounds of the whole place. So a big part of, especially bird photography, is patience, which I hate that. I want it and I want it now, but you learn to slow down, and it's a good meditation. It really is. I find a lot of peace with it. I don't mind being by myself out of Berry Springs or Muleshoe or anywhere. I'm good company for myself, but I love to share what I do too. And it's my best mentors. I always bring this up. I always ask them, what in the world can I do to pay you back for everything you've done for me? And it's all to a person. It's do it for the next guy, pay it forward. I mean, and the really good ones, I've got this National Geographic guy, Graham Simpson. I would highly recommend following what he does. He's a landscape photographer, and he sells landscapes to people like William Shatner for $35,000 to $100,000. So he doesn't post those. He's got an agent. I mean, like if a Saudi prince wants to build an apartment in Paris, and this guy that's the agent will get it fully furnished, everything it needs ready to go. So when the guy opens the door, it's like he lives there. All the artwork on the wall is my buddy. He found out William Shatner likes those water wheels that are in the Northeast. So he did a whole series of water wheels. And he doesn't have to do anything. He just looks at his checking account one day and there's another 35 grand in there. It's like, you know, where was I when that he figured that out? He doesn't post those, but he's an avid wildlife photographer with a huge passion for it. And he's one of those good guys that shares with everybody. And I think the very best ones are not threatened by somebody wanting to learn, like you're going to learn their secrets. I mean, there's no way I can do what he does. He's developed his own style. I can come close on a few pictures, but he's consistent.
is that Graham Simpson?
Graham, Graeme. He's from New Zealand, and he became a U.S. citizen a while back. His wife worked for the government in the D.C. area. He's taken me to Chesapeake Bay before. My brother used to live near Gettysburg, and I would borrow my brother's car and go spend 2 or 3 days with this guy. He's incredible. Chris Davis Sema, who used to be part of our group that was in that picture of us when we got back to me, the goofy picture. She moved to Maryland, and now she's under his wing. So I introduced her to him.
A YouTube channel that he has or
Oh,
website?
he's on Facebook. He might
On
do
Facebook.
Instagram too. He posts pretty
Okay.
much every day. We don't take a couple weeks off here and there to go do a trip and get reloaded. But his real passion is any kind of wildlife, a lot of birds. He'll get incredible shots of frogs or, you name it, flowers. He's incredible with water lilies, and he'll go to somewhere, similar to our Zilker gardens and just spend a day, and he comes out of there. He's actually, they offered him a job at National Geographic years ago and he didn't take it. He was a photographer for the New Zealand tourism industry. So they give him all the film he wanted. That was in film days, all the developing he needed, and he got a lot of it that he could use for himself. And he was happy doing that. And he wanted to work until he had a pension. And he said that was in the days when National Geographic paid the equivalent of about $250,000 a year to the few guys that they had on staff. And then Rupert Murdoch bought it out, and now it's all freelancers. And if you want to go on a National Geographic tour to Costa Rica, you get a National Geographic photographer, but the guy's a glorified tour guide. It's sad. It's really sad.
Last call for questions. It's getting on towards closing. Okay, last call. Well, on behalf of the group, Dave, it's certainly been a great pleasure to have you tonight.
Thanks.
You've shared with us. Hopefully we'll be able to share with you as much as you shared with us. It's so great that we have good club members who will step in and help out like you did tonight. And I would just ask any other member who feels like they'd like to share some of their photography, a gallery or some technique that they have, to contact Bill Bunton or another officer, or Gary Hook, because he's a program and Bill's the vice president. Am I right on that? And we would love to have even partially, it wouldn't have to be how many slides did you have tonight?
About 100. That's usually about an hour, and I can usually either hurry it up or slow it down.
You did
Well,
fantastic. You were moving at a great pace. Yeah,
that worked out to about an hour. I was keeping an eye on it because I had like that Audubon thing. The people had so many questions that turned into 2 hours. I mean, and it was before I got my hip replaced, and I was standing behind a podium, and I was about ready to die standing there. I mean,
well, hopefully we're all comfortable at home. We enjoyed it immensely. Let's have a round of applause for Dave and his incredible images and the missionary
Thanks so
work
much.
that you
I
do
love
too.
this club. It's done so much for me. I hated some of the judges when I first got here. Carol Schiraldi pointed out one time, and I had a bright yellow leaf in the corner of one of my pictures that distracted from the subject, and I thought I had the greatest picture in the world. And I know when Donna first came on board, we got her to come. She was all bashful about entering, and now she's kicking everybody's butt. But I think that we've got a good vibe where it's all good constructive criticism. We don't chop people down. Gee, isn't the ocean supposed to be level? We joke about stuff, but we're not tearing somebody apart.
Yeah, the bird on the stick.
We're still going to deal with the bird on the stick.
Well,
If
I just can't get over how beautifully focused many of those close-up pictures that you showed us tonight were. They're so sharp. I don't know how you do it.
Well, that's not a native lens. That's on an adapter. But they just came out with a 100 to 400 that's designed for it. That's $2,700. So I don't know if I'll save up for that or for the better drone, but that thing is supposed to be a beast. It's only 3 pounds.
That's true.
Dave's presentation was so great, would people like to see the same sort of stuff from Coda Motorsports?
Oh, that would be fun.
Do you have some? You mean your pictures, Bill?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh,
I could-
you don't want to see mine?
Oh.
Well, you've got a passion for it, Bill. That's the main thing. I mean, I
Yeah.
love what I'm doing. So it's,
Yeah.
You can't go
Yeah.
wrong when you like.
Let me put
that.
that one in my hip pocket, and if somebody doesn't manage the show, I can do that for us.
Great.
Yeah,
That'd
a
be
good,
totally,
good idea. So if anybody
I'm
would
happy
like
to
to,
jump in anytime.
Mark and I will be at the annex at 9:30 tomorrow morning. And so if you have a little time and can make it there, otherwise, please put it on your calendar. We have until August 30 to go to the annex to see the show. Any other announcements? Any other closing thoughts?
What was that city Dave was talking about that he goes to at the Oklahoma border for dark skies? It's not really a city, I
It's called
guess.
the Hagerman National Wildlife Refuge. You can't go in the park after dark. I think you might be able, I don't know if they might have camping there. You might, I don't know, maybe not. But what I'll do is go down a country road just outside of the park and find somewhere to set up in a ditch or whatever. Maybe
Hope you
you can
don't
get a
find Lover's
farmhouse in
Lane.
the for a farmhouse or a windmill in the foreground or something.
And the annex tomorrow morning? What annex?
Oh, that's the Round Rock Williamson Annex.
It's a
on
gesture annex. There's a map
Jester
on the,
Annex.
there's a map on
And
the
we-
homepage.
Okay.
You're gonna join us, Marilyn?
Maybe.
Marilyn,
How
you're
early
gonna,
we talking about?
9:30. You're gonna be at work. You're out of luck.
Oh, wait,
we'll
just
get
wait.
coffee, we'll get
Oh,
coffee.
yeah, I gotta go to work.
Yeah. Pick a
Okay.
night.
Okay, well, that wraps it up. We want to thank Ed for hosting our Zoom. Thank you so much. And thank you all of our participants for being here tonight.
Good job, Dave.
Thanks.
Night.
Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
Clay.
Thank you, Dave.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dave.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.